This is News 4 New York with Chuck Scarborough and Sue Simmons.
Good evening. While the accused killer of former Beatle John Lennon undergoes mental tests in Bellevue Hospital, grieving fans continue their vigil at the place where he was gunned down.
An almost tangible melancholy is settled over the world tonight. The reality of John Lennon's death is set in. The numbness is wearing off. And against that backdrop, the latest facts about his murder seem particularly stark and chilling. This is what the medical examiner says. He says John Lennon was shot twice in the back and twice in the shoulder, not in the chest as originally believed, in the back. He died of massive hemorrhaging and shock. A sense of shock continues to be felt at the Dakota apartment building on the Upper West Side where Lennon lived and died. And John Hambrick is there for us. John.
Chuck, many of the people who showed up here outside the Dakota late last night after John Lennon was shot down remain here tonight, and they have been joined by still other mourners who are here despite this cold, wet, rainy night. It is possible, actually, that some of these people who are gathered aren't even aware that 25-year-old Mark David Chapman was arraigned late today for Lennon's murder. Heather Bernard will have more on that later. But first, who is Mark David Chapman? Here's what we know so far. In 1973, Chapman graduated from DeKalb High School in suburban Atlanta, and some of his former classmates recall him as a long-haired hippie fellow who did a sudden about-face before graduation.
Oh, in 11th grade, I believe, 12th grade, right in there. He comes in, he's got a crew cut, doesn't wear blue jeans anymore, tennis shoes or anything, carries a little Bible around with him. Just a phenomenal change.
In 1977, Chapman moved to Honolulu, where he lived with his wife Gloria in this apartment house, and he was considered a good tenant.
Little fella, and very nice, pleasant to talk to, and knew what he was talking about, and did not sound like he was off his rock or anything like that.
Though unemployed lately, Chapman last worked as a security guard. In October, he bought a .38 caliber pistol at this Honolulu store. The same gun New York police say he used to kill John Lennon, to shoot him 4 times, only hours after Lennon yesterday autographed Chapman's record album in front of the Dakota. Chapman was only a child living in this Atlanta house when Lennon and the Beatles came to fame in the early 60s. He was born in 1955, the same year John Lennon and Paul McCartney met and established the roots of what would become the Beatles. During Chapman's arraignment, the DA's office read what was thought to be Chapman's criminal record. Turns out those were erroneous statements today. A computer had popped up the same last name of a fugitive with the same birth date and the same general description as Chapman. Heather Bernard kept tabs on the arraignment and then went to Bellevue when Chapman was taken there later. Then she filed this report.
Mark David Chapman's attorney told the judge his client does not fully understand the charges against him. The attorney asked that Chapman be given psychiatric tests. Assistant District Attorney Kim Holgrefe objected, saying Chapman deliberately and with intelligence and premeditation executed Lennon after borrowing a substantial sum of money to come to New York to do exactly what he did. In disclosing the source of Chapman's airfare from Hawaii and the $2,200 cash police found on the suspect, the DA mostly squelched earlier speculation that Chapman had been hired to kill Lennon. Chapman was taken to Bellevue Hospital for evaluation and placed under suicide watch. Those were the judge's orders after he learned Chapman had tried to kill himself on 2 previous occasions. Doctors here at Bellevue may find the answer to the big question not discussed at the arraignment. That is, why did Chapman kill Lennon? Police officers who spoke with the suspect last night say he told them, "I don't know why I did it. I had nothing against him." Police say when they first confronted Chapman at the scene, he threw his arms over his head and begged, "Please don't hurt me." Police said once they'd reassured him they wouldn't, Chapman explained he trusted and respected cops because he'd done some security work. Then he added, "Please don't leave me, stay with me." Chapman told police he'd been staying at the YMCA and the Sheraton Center since he arrived in New York in early November. He said he'd told his wife he was coming here to straighten his head out. He said he'd been frequently profoundly depressed and had been getting some psychiatric outpatient care in Hawaii. Chapman's attorney described the suspect as extremely confused and called the shooting motiveless. He said Chapman admired John Lennon tremendously. Heather Bernard, News 4, Manhattan.
For the most part, the people gathered here outside the Dakota to mourn the loss of John Lennon have been quiet and respectful. But there was at least one point when push came to shove for some today. That was when Lennon's former fellow Beatle, Ringo Starr, arrived from Europe to offer what consolation he could to Lennon's wife, Yoko Ono. Chances are nobody intended any trouble, but with all the hubbub around Ringo, there was certainly and understandably apprehension among the security forces. News Force David Diaz was here as the crowds gathered, and he shares for us the mood.
For those who came, mourning the death of John Lennon meant reliving some of the most important moments in their lives. For her, the Beatles meant being 14, being a hippie, part of the peace movement, and since then had come to mean even more.
And even now, as an ex-hippie, I still hear his songs, and I still hear the message that he was bringing across to people about that we should live in a peaceful world and how wonderful it would be to live in a peaceful world, and I never want to hear that message stopped.
Many could do nothing to express their grief except stand silently for hours. Others brought flowers, turning the gate at the Dakota into a garden of mourning. And some could only cry.
Over.
As we said, and as you can see, there are still mourners here at the Dakota tonight, and some have told me they intend to stay well into the night, perhaps until dawn. Their way of honoring the memory of a pop hero, a man who made music and was part of a cultural legend. John Lennon, shot to death here at the age of 40.
John Lennon's 17-year-old son by his first marriage, Julian, arrived in New York tonight. Security was tight. He was kept away from news photographers. Lennon's widow, Yoko Ono, says there will be no formal funeral for her husband. She asks only that his fans pray for him. And we will continue our coverage of the Lennon assassination with a look back next.
Tonight, News 4 New York is sponsored by Concord Watches.